Hi there, I'm Christine Zips, and today I have the special honor of having as our guest Shonagh Home. She is a shamanic therapist, teacher, author, and poet. She follows the wisdom of the ancients and serves as an An-Bandri, Gaelic for a Celtic medicine woman or seer. As a modern medicine woman, she brings her connection to nature and the spirit worlds into her flourishing practice, working with clients from around the world who travel to her farmhouse in Vermont for a unique psycho-spiritual healing experience. She's an international speaker on the subject of visionary mushroom healing and director of the mystery school Daughters of the Fairy Tree, a year of Celtic-inspired bardic study. So, Shonagh, I'm so pleased to have you with us. I'm really pleased that we've shared a little bit between us, so which makes me all the more eager to get to know you better, for the world to know about you and your marvelous work. And would like to start out with maybe just inviting you to share with us what brought you here and where you're going from here. So I will be quiet and let you do that.
Oh, well, thank you, Christine, very much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate this opportunity to share my work and some of the study that I have done over the years. And so I call myself a shamanic therapist, and that's because, for all intents and purposes, I am a therapist and I am fascinated by the great mystery of the psyche. And I love to work with people in that capacity, but I go far deeper than conventional psychotherapy because I work as well with the spirit. And I will tell you, one of my, what I call teachers, referred to as teachers from the ethers, is Carl Jung. And I really appreciate that he explored these other methodologies like the I Ching and astrology, tarot. He was very interested in alchemy, and his protege, Marie Louise von Franz, really became quite the expert in the study of alchemy because she could read ancient Greek and Latin. And so she translated these old texts for Jung. And so I find all of that really fascinating, and all of it contributes beautifully to working with another and exploring deeply the patterning that they are in, and how to help them see the patterns that they're in. And once you can see the pattern, recognize it, then you can take the steps to shift out of it. And so this is what I do with people. And I've been conducting these retreats in my home, which is very unique because most therapists don't want to do that. And this is where an individual comes into my home for 5 days and we work very deeply. It's deep psychospiritual work. And I've been doing this for over 4 years and have worked with well over 100 people, 21 to 75 men and women. And I now have a wonderful farmhouse in Vermont. And I've got a beautiful labyrinth on my property, and it is very conducive to this level of work. So that's what I do. I'm an autodidact. So I'm self-taught. I love to learn. I love to read. I love to research. Like, I love that. And in fact, with this whole, all of us at home right now, I just spend time with my library and my books and online doing the research. And so you and I were talking earlier about how our rights are being stripped, have been stripped from us with this whole COVID-19 story. And
Yes,
yes,
and how many of us don't realize this is happening and why, right?
yes, yes. And I have been studying for the past at least 8 years now the deeper tenets of law, not legal system, civil procedure, that kind of thing, but more in particular, the maxims of law. And those those are the foundations of law all around the world. A maxim is a principle of truth that is always consonant with logic and reason. And you hear it and it's obvious. And there are a list of them, and they're in the back of Bouvier's Law Dictionary. And what happened was, about 9 years ago, I met a man who became my teacher on this subject because he's so knowledgeable, and he dropped out of high school at the age of 15 and missed out on the rest of the indoctrination. And he is the smartest person I've ever met. He never went back to school. He is an autodidact and became a scholar of law. And when I would hang out with him, I would bring a digital recorder and record our conversations because it was so new to me. I didn't know any of this information. And he had said to me, stressed to me, you have to start with the maxims, and you have to become fluent in the maxims because they're axioms or truisms. They're obvious, and they color everything, including law. And a definition of a maxim of law says that they carry the same weight as acts of parliament. And so they're in the back of Bouvier's Law Dictionary, and every judge must know his maxims. I don't care how crooked he is, he's got to know his maxims.
One quick question is, are you referring, when you say law, are you referring to natural law?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Thank you for the distinction. Yes, natural law, which is God's law, and yes, and the common law. So natural law, it's you do no harm. You don't commit fraud in your contracts. There's the 10 commandments. And it's interesting too, because we were talking earlier about the Bible, and they've done quite a propaganda campaign to make smart people like ourselves think, oh, those Bible thumpers, oh God, get that away from me, that, whatever, that Christianity stuff. When in actuality, it's a book of law. And the maxims of law are ecclesiastical in nature, and they all come from the Bible ultimately.
Absolutely. That's why they have them in every courtroom, right?
Yes, yes.
For example.
Yes, but the Bible's also a book of grimoires, and a grimoire is a spell. And so it's all—
That's a new term. What does that mean?
A grimoire is a spell casting, and binding and unbinding. And so we're all of us bound to the spell of this system that we're in right now. And so how do we unbind that? And so one of my, I would say my favorite maxim of law says, as a thing is bound, so it is unbound. In other words, there's always remedy. There can't not be.
Right. It seems related to as above, so below. A little bit, maybe not.
Well, the above, as above, so below, that's an axiom of alchemy. And what it means is, of course, the planetary bodies are magnetic, heavy magnetics. And so as they move, they have influences. And so what happens above, we can't not be affected below. So it's a mirror. And so as a thing is bound, so it is unbound, is saying that it doesn't matter what the issue or the problem is, there must be a remedy, there must be a solution. There can't not be, because we are living in duality, and you can't have life without positive and negative charge. And so to everything, it's opposite.
And I'm just thinking, to those of us who are learning a lot of this new, I think a logical question might be, how do we know we're under a spell? And if that be true, I believe it is, how do we recognize, how do we unveil the remedy or a remedy?
Well, if you're under a spell, usually you don't know you're under a spell.
Okay, then it must be working pretty well. Yeah.
For a number of people. So I see spell also as indoctrination.
Yes.
And I think of the line Jesus said on the cross. And again, whether Jesus was a real person or not, I think is really irrelevant. He is used as an example in the New Testament as someone who was deeply learned in the law.
Absolutely.
and could stand on his authority. And because he knew the law, he would simply recite it back to his oppressors. And then what could they do? He was reciting their own law back to them. But he was on the cross, and he said of the people who crucified him, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. And so they were indoctrinated, were under a spell, or Carl Jung would say they were in a collective psychosis. And so we see that now. Our media, which is weaponized, it's hypnotizing people, and it's repeat, fear, 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 and telling them what's going on. And there is a saying, repetition is the mother of memory. So it's constantly repeated. And so people who pay attention to that fall under that spell, and also associate, they associate authority with the mainstream news channels and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. And so they're just really don't question it, because that was the source, the official source.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you brought that up. And I think it might be timely to share that why mainstream media is mostly owned by Big Pharma, and all of their messages. I'll ask your doctor. And there's currently, and this is like April of 2020, there's a documentary type presentation that's kind of going viral. I believe it's called Out of the Shadows. And it's put on, I haven't read it all yet. You may have seen that. But I think it's being shared by a man who used to be a stunt double or a stunt man in Hollywood until he had a terrible accident and isn't able to do that anymore. But he saw what was going on. Are you familiar with that particular thing?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but I have not had the time to watch it yet, but
Right.
it's on my list to watch. And I think it's interesting because I understand that it is covering or discussing and showing us how we are being manipulated through media, film, television.
Vision, right?
Or
Vision.
lie vision. Yes, with its
Yes,
programming or programs.
exactly. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. And again, like you were saying, maybe it was because we were talking earlier that everything is done in plain sight, with the weaponized, all of that. But yeah.
Yes, and I always say spells only work if you believe in them. And for myself, I have just always been about the individual. I've been an outlier my whole life. And I tried desperately to fit in, of course, when I was younger in junior high and high school, to absolutely no avail, very cringeworthy, And, and
I so know of what you speak.
yeah, and suffered, horrible bullying in junior high, which was very scarring. But I'll tell you, I can see how it has served me, because I didn't kind of fit in with the gang. At some point, you start to ask those deeper questions, and it also frees you up to start exploring your own thing and not worry anymore about what the gang thinks.
Yes.
Which is so important, because I always say the collective is always misguided. Unless you're in a very enlightened society, which we are not, the collective is always misguided. You can bank on it.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you there. I have a little meme. It's like a circle of white fish all facing the same direction. And then there's a black one that's facing outside the circle. It says something like, the more I learn about the world, the less I desire to fit in. So, you're not going to. But back then, when it's everything and you weren't accepted by the collective, that it can be quite painful. But I think it's a rite of passage that many of us might even be a test of our resolve that we might need to go through. So
I agree. It shapes us.
mhm.
It absolutely shapes us. And I think it's interesting that I've ended up, in very rural Vermont, as far from the madding crowd as I possibly can
How
be.
beautiful.
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I would not want to be in these crowded cities, or even in a little town at this point. But I will say that, I'm here studying intently these maxims, especially now, like I've really returned to that because I realize how important this knowledge is and how few people have it. And so I've used my understanding of or my knowledge of the maxims and these other tenets of law, which really are about knowing your rights and how to defend them. I've used that in my therapy practice as a way to empower my clients. And so, with everything that has occurred now and people in lockdown, and I find that term extremely disturbing because that's a prison term, and people are bandying that about with a smile on their face. It occurred to me, okay, first of all, I need to do more online because, of course, I'm not working with individual clients right now. And I thought, all right, I've got to come up with some kind of online course, but not just any course. I want to come up with something that is genuinely going to empower people moving forward. And so the title of my course is called Empowered Forward Movement. And it's 4 classes. It just began last Friday. And the first class discusses the maxims of law. And there are hundreds of them. There are many, many, many of them. But the ones that I know by heart. And that's because I would, as my friend advised me, I would read the list of maxims on a regular basis. And certain ones would just strike me. I'd be like, God, that is so true. And then I just end up memorizing it. And then it would be so applicable in my personal life, commercially. And so I'll give you an example, and this is relevant to what we see happening now. There's a maxim of law that says the burden is on he who affirms, not he who denies. And so we have a story, we have a narrative in the media, and it is telling us that all these people are dying from this COVID-19, and oh, the hospitals are overflowing, and some are, but some are empty from what we're being told.
Even in New York City.
Yes, and so the burden is on he who affirms. Well, okay, we have all been raised, we've been schooled in a Prussian education system. And a Prussian education system, this is all around the world. It is designed to produce unquestioning compliance. And there is conditioning involved in our education as well, from Pavlov and Skinner. Skinner, by the way, was into totalitarianism. And so that is about punishment, reward, and you want to be accepted by everyone. And if you don't get it right, you're punished or shamed. And so, of course,
you don't want to excel above the others. That's not acceptable.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. So we don't question in the way that we should. And we have also been conditioned to give unconditional authority to our perceived authorities, whether they be medical professionals or political pundits or whatever. And so everyone has, not everyone, but most people have bought this story hook, line, and sinker. And I don't see a whole lot of people saying, excuse me, you guys, where's the proof? And we want it authenticated, hard proof that this is indeed happening, because all we know is what we're being told. And people have, again, been so conditioned to give authority to these mainstream news channels and personalities. And they're not questioning, and then they're whipped up into an emotional hysteria. And of course, when we are in emotion, we can't access the higher order thinking, so we can't reason. And if you can't reason, you're in big trouble. You can't think critically. And so that is a maxim I see has great weight right now. The burden is on he who affirms, not he who denies. And in law, if you're bringing a claim, that's a big deal. And there are several elements to a claim. And if you're missing even one, your claim fails. But again, we have not been conditioned to question in this way and demand that level of accountability. We have not. And so I remember my law friend saying to me, Shonagh, listen, The majority of people blame and complain. And so if you don't see it, go find it. If you don't have it, go get it. In other words, it's on us, it's personal responsibility. And these maxims really speak to personal responsibility, because another one says, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So hardly anyone knows the law. One would think that we would be taught these essential principles that are universal. In our school system, we are not
Right.
taught this. And yet it's no excuse, we're told, through these maxims, because you can look this information up. And I love sayings. And one of my all-time favorites says, every man has two educations. The first he's given. The second, more important, he gives to himself. And so I think of my public school education. I started private school, a small convent school run by nuns, and then ended up in the States and off to public school. And it was really pretty lame, in my opinion, especially now studying this kind of thing. I realize how vast my ignorance is and how much I have to learn. And I always say, look to nature and the ancients as your teachers, and you'll be just fine. I don't look to the New York Times or the Huffington Post
Oh, no.
to tell me what to think or how to behave. So back to the maxims. Another maxim says, oh dear, get ready for this, let the deceived be deceived. So there are those of us who have eyes to see, and we'll have the fortitude to ask the hard questions while people try to shame us and call us names and terms, which are ad hominems, which is a logical fallacy. Also, no one knows the logical fallacies, very few people. Those are
Amazing.
arguments.
Yes, I'm reminded of the saying, there are none so blind as those who will not see. It seems to be appropriate.
Yes, correct. Yes. Another one of my sayings that I love is by the Greek playwright Sophocles, that says, what is sought may be found, but truth unsearched for seldom comes to light. So in other words, even way back then, you had to seek. You had to seek. And then the Bible says, ask and you will receive, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open. But you know what? Okay, so magical thinking would just be thinking, I know if it's just going to happen. No, you have to ask, you have to seek, you have to knock. So you have to initiate it, because we are in an electromagnetic field, and thoughts are electric and they create a charge, and emotions, create a big charge. And so when you think of something, our thoughts are very, very important. I'll tell you, there's a writing that I love by James Allen called As a Man Thinketh. And this was written in 1905, and he was riffing on a line from the Bible that says, I think, as a man thinketh, so he is. And this clearly really got to James, and he pondered that. And he wrote like a 21-page dissertation on it, essentially. It's been translated into every language possible. And you can download the PDF for free. You can listen to it on YouTube. And he's saying that the mind is like a garden, and it must put forth. So you can either tend it and feed it, or not. But either way, it's going to put forth. And so I really see the mind as temple. It's interesting that this is called the temple.
Yes, absolutely. As is our body,
Yeah.
our body temple, and like the mustard seed and planting in the mental soil. And by the way, I did want to mention that in our show notes below in the comments section, we will include links. Shonagh has provided a few already, but we will be very careful to go through the content and provide referenced links to, like what you just mentioned, the book, and so people can get more below there that supports what we're talking about today. And yeah, that's so good. And I think I've shared with you that I've been involved a little bit with the notice of liability process, and talking about being responsible, that if we see something and we want it, we're not agreeing to where we see it going, we can look to see who is responsible, personally, individually responsible for causing harm on the planet. And through the process of the notice of liability, they can be held individually and personally liable and accountable. And there are ways, consequences if they do not. So it's all fair and equitable and done in full transparency. And I'll be coming out with more information about that soon. But it all falls in line that it seems like now is the time when things are coming to a head, would you say, Shonagh, with what's
Yeah.
happening in our world today? It seems that more and more people are awakening. And, I've heard, I've shared some things with some friends who said, oh no, our government wouldn't allow that to happen. That can't be true. And, it's difficult to open eyes who are not willing to see. So, I don't, anyway.
Well, that's why that maxim is so important. Let the deceived be deceived. And there's an old saying that goes along with that, because I like the old sayings as well, because they're really truisms, which is similar. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Or
And I
think.
think, or think, yes. And so the most important thing really ultimately is that we take responsibility for ourselves and take responsibility to, especially in this country, read the Constitution, read the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, read through these maxims, and also understand how the foundations of contract work. So back to this course that I'm going to be teaching, next Friday, I'll be teaching Foundations of Contract. Now, by the way, none of this is legal advice. This is just sharing general knowledge and hopefully inspiring people to then do their own further research on this. And you were mentioning the notice of liability, and all of that is done peacefully.
Yes.
There is a saying, a truism, the pen is mightier than the sword. And so we don't go to war. We don't argue. If we understand how contract works, there's 4 elements of how a contract works. A contract is an offer and acceptance. And it's a promise. A contract is a promise to come through with some function, some service, or goods, or whatever. And so if someone gives you an offer, and by the way, everything they're telling us right now is an offer, okay? Even mandatory vaccines, that's an offer. And so you can do, there's 4 choices for you. 2 of them you'll be in honor, and 2 of them you'll be in dishonor. So you can accept the offer, you're in honor. You can conditionally accept the offer, which I highly recommend. You're in honor. To be in dishonor, that would be going silent. You never want to go silent. Silence is deadly, is a very old saying.
It implies acceptance, yes?
That's right. There is a maxim of law that says, he who does not object appears to agree.
Absolutely.
And the other dishonor is to get into an argument. And argument and argue are 2 very different things, because argue actually means to come into the light, to sort of understand what each other is saying, but an actual argument is a dispute, and you don't want to get into a dispute. So people might be thinking, well, wait a minute, hell no, am I going to have a vaccine and they can go to hell, and I'm going to, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yes, and. Okay, they're going to make this very difficult. And this entire system everything is by consent. And so they harvest our consent. And it's usually by trickery, they harvest our consent through licenses and registration. Now we've consented, and we've given them jurisdiction over us. So with this, for instance, this $1,200 check, this very paltry sum that they're going to give to people after taking, $2 trillion out of the Fed and giving it to all their buddies somewhere in some other parts of the world. In any case, if you accept that check and you sign that check, that's a contract. And I read somewhere someone was saying people are going to give over all their liberty for $1,200. Now, that is not to say, that's no judgment on these people, because of course, what will the government do? It'll make darn sure that people are in such dire straits. They're so completely desperate that by God, they need that money, right? And so they will sign it. Well, there's a way of signing the check. See, this is the thing. I didn't know any of this, and people don't know this. There's something called a qualified signature, because if you just sign your name willy-nilly, you've signed away all your rights. So again, we've got to learn this kind of thing. But the contract piece, we have to be very careful because we don't want to contract with these guys into this new world order reality that they have planned for us. So never, I think, never has it been more important that we understand these foundations. And so this is the, and I'll tell you, with this class I put forth, by the way, the third class is going to be on the logical fallacies, fallacious arguments. Those are used every day. We use them ourselves without even realize what we're doing, and we get really caught in a mess as a result. And then the fourth class is going to be on helping to really read people deeper so that we can establish more harmony together. I have had a record number of people sign up for this course. Like, I'm surprised. I've never had that many people sign up for a course I've put out before. And after I taught the first class, which was on the maxims last Friday, I hung up. It's an audio class. And my phone was inundated with texts from people who had been on the class saying, oh my God, thank you, amazing, this was fantastic. And then I opened my email and I had a flurry of email. So in other words, that is telling me that more people are realizing, you know, I don't know how to, well, Jefferson said, like I said, an educated man knows his rights and how to defend them. I think people are realizing, oh God, what do I do? You know, and I'm scared because knowledge is power. And if you're in ignorance, you bet you're scared. And slaves are ignorant. And essentially, we have been raised in a slave society. And so here I am, essentially on this path of what I call the unbandrie. I actually got that term from my dear friend Kathy Coyle, who herself is an unbandrie in Ireland. And so a medicine woman of Celtic heritage. And, you know, in Ireland, well, in the UK, in that area, we had the Druids. And the Druids were men and women. And they weren't just skilled in magic and doing cool ceremonies over in Stonehenge or whatever. These people were deeply learned. And when I was researching, particularly the Druid women, it's, you know, there isn't a whole lot because they didn't write anything down, but there are accounts that were given by the Roman soldiers on these people. And they were deeply learned in law. And the Romans were, who were actually very quite sexist, they were blown away that a Druid woman would be brought in to make as judge on some major matter, or she would be brought in to give counsel on matters of war. I mean, they couldn't even believe it. But you have to be deeply learned in these kind of tenets and these maxims to be able to do such a thing. And so that's why this is also part of the school that I was going to start this spring. So we're going to have to, we're postponing that till the fall. And I have 3 groups of 8 women who've signed up for not just the mystical to explore, but also I want my women to have a working understanding and to be the embodiment and empowered by these universal foundations. And they are the foundation of nations around the world. If you don't have those tenets of truth, of self-evident truth, you have anarchy, the worst expression of anarchy. So I feel very called, simply because I've studied this. I'm no expert, but at least to share some foundational information in the hopes that then people will continue to gather more knowledge for themselves.
This is so wonderful. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking of how this is going out. And for one thing, I'm very glad you've received this wonderful response. It's so well deserved. And I do believe that the time is now for what you bring forth. So thank you for that. And you speak about what I believe many of us might be a little foreign to, about this idea of self-governance. Would you be comfortable in elaborating a little bit more about what it is to self-govern?
Okay, there is a saying that says, govern yourselves lest ye be governed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have been infantilized over the course of the 20th century, and we have been seduced, our parents and grandparents, into steadily giving over rights for benefits. And for instance, one of the benefits is public school. In other words, when we are born, we are sons and daughters of the Creator. However you think of the Creator, whether it's a goddess or a god, it doesn't matter. Something grand created nature, created us. And we are born with inherent rights. And those are God-given. So that if someone else, if a man, gives you your rights, you're a slave. Because we already have rights. And so all of this sort of fighting for civil rights are benefits, they're privileges.
Does it all start with the birth certificate, for example? Or
Yes.
probably even before, but I don't mean to be taking you off track, but it's
No, that's okay. That's
yeah.
okay. That's an awful lot to get into. I'll just
Okay.
simply say, I'll say, here is my understanding. All right, we're born a living baby. And we are in this world of commerce, but we're in the world, but not of it. And we have to remember that. And it's really easy to forget that because we can get really sucked in. And then there's that line in the Bible that says, my people perish for lack of knowledge, not because they're not eating right, because they're ignorant. And so we forget who we are. And especially if we are not raised with these principles and our parents have not been raised with these principles, this has been going on for some time. And so when you don't have that level of, like, those principles form our rudder and they help us navigate the commercial world. And when you don't have that, boy, can you be schnookered. And so, for instance, Aesop's fables, a number of children used to be raised with Aesop's fables. And they're about animals, and specifically because a lion is a lion and a mouse is a mouse, you know, so they embody the attributes of that character. And it'll be a certain story. And at the end of that story, there's always a moral or an underlying principle. So you're teaching your children from an early age these foundations of these principles. So it helps them to navigate this world that we are in. And everything is commerce. We're in commerce right now. It's an exchange of goods and services and ideas and everything. And it occurred to me, you know, the Bible, it's all allegory. It's all, you know, and it's deeply, deeply encoded. And so Satan rules the dead. Okay, it's not some dude, you know, with horns and half man, whatever. I see it as the dead is the world of fiction. And so that's the commercial world. So weaving this back to the birth certificate, a certificate is a bond. And so that birth certificate, it has the baby's name in all capital letters. And so when something is in all capital letters, it's Latin, it's capitis diminutia maximus. It means you've been diminished to the maximum, you're a dead thing. So all capital letters are seen on gravestones and ships or vessels. And birth, by the way, our English language, oh boy, is this a language full of spells? Because you're birthed, but there's also birth, B-E-R-T-H, as a ship or vessel births. And then we're born, we're manifest. Well, what's held within the ship's vessel? The manifest.
Yes.
And the ship is birthed and caught by the dock, or you know, docks, and we're caught by a doctor. You know, there's all these very, very strange going, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so the birth certificate is an overlay. It's an overlay onto the living baby. And really, it enables us to function in commerce. So that all capitals name it's what's known as your straw man. It's your persona. It's not you, the living man or woman. And you better know that distinction. Of course, no one does. But there's a serious distinction there. And then you will notice your credit cards and your bank statements and everything are all, your name's always in all capitals. And in rules of grammar, that's not how you spell your name. You spell it in upper and lower case. So a distinction is made. And so we have to pay attention to those distinctions. And so Satan rules the dead, the world of fiction, the commercial system, where there's a price on everything. and you can get real sucked in and forget who you are. And then Jesus is about the living nature, God's laws, living men and women. And so indeed there is a difference. And I think ultimately, well, we are in that sort of book of Revelations right now, and Revelations is the revealing. It's the revealing. And so a lot is being revealed to us. Now, what I'm discussing tonight, the maxims and foundations of contract and all of that, for many people that will feel like it's being revealed. It's been with us this whole time, but it's been, very conveniently swept over here. We'll give the muggles 400 cable TV stations, and we'll keep them very, very busy working like slaves, and two income families. We'll get them addicted to all kinds of material things, so they're always in debt. And then we'll put we'll have usury. We will put interest connected to that debt, so they'll never be able to pay it off. Blah 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 blah. And so what I see Christ as, Christ is the light, right? Christ comes from the etymology Christos. Christos was the oil that lit the lamps back in the day. And so the second coming of Christ, again, I don't see this as Christianity, but in any case, the second coming of Christ is the light going off in this lamp. Christ is the light, information, knowledge. The truth shall set you free.
The illumination.
Yes, and the commercial system it's lying to us every moment of every day. And actually, I think a number of people will agree, it is very satanic right now. I mean, really satanic. It is creepy. The halftime shows for the NFL and the opening shows for the Olympics, and people
The symbols are everywhere. Yeah, the one eye, and
yes, oh yeah, and the
Masonic rings.
That's right. That's right. And so it's all of this symbolism, and we also as a people are symbolically illiterate, so they can hide this right in front of us. And by the way, when people say, who's they? Well, I don't think that's much of a secret anymore. We have a group of international people who've held the reins of power for many, many, many centuries. And they fund both sides of a war, and they make a killing, which is a very bad joke. And so, their money, their wealth, and their power is absolutely breathtaking. It's beyond anything we can possibly imagine. And
absolutely. And when you mention they, I believe we tend to picture people when you say they, where I believe more than that, because there are people involved, but when one or two or whatever fall out of their powerful position at the top of that pyramid, they can be replaced. And I believe it's probably more accurate, would you agree, to think of they as being a force, an energy that is maybe not even of the same, maybe not even the same species as we are. I don't mean to be getting so out there, but I think it's more of a dark force, an energy that's been pulling the strings for a very long time. And that can sound kind of dark and scary, but what do you think about that theory?
What I think is what we are talking about is psychopaths.
Right.
And a psychopath lacks empathy.
Yes.
And so a psychopath to me is not human. So that's how I would look at this. And,
exactly.
And there's much being revealed. The pedophilia is the tip of the iceberg with these people. And I think that's kind of entry level for them.
Yes.
Because there are some very, very dark rituals going on. And again, this is not new. This is actually very, very old. But it is very much in our face. And I don't want to go down that road.
No, I don't think we need to. No,
but I will. Anyway, yeah. So what I want to do, what I am all about is, okay, first of all, we cannot solve a problem if we won't look at it. And so, yes, indeed, this is dark. And so, all right, what is that remedy? And I see, well, again, that Bible, so funny, I sound like a Bible thumper, and I'm so, I'm like, but again, that's the propaganda that's been
Exactly.
put
It's a
forth.
document. It's a document.
Exactly. It's a
It,
document, and it's
it
very, very old. It's
it's
very,
more
very old.
having to do with contracts and law
That's
than religion, as I
that,
understand it.
yes, yes. And I have a very dear friend who is an older Scottish gentleman. He's in Canada, and he's a scholar of the Bible. He's a scholar of law, and he is working with a few individuals there, and they are essentially cracking that code to help free themselves from the matrix, if you will. And so it's all in there. But again, you've got to be able to read between the lines. You cannot just take it at face value. And also, the degree of our desire will determine if we're going to be able to do this or not. In other words, this is on us. We have to grow up. And I think this is what we're in. This is grow up time. The party is over. Indeed, it is.
Absolutely. The time for tolerance with whining is over. And given with what is going on in the world now that we're all familiar with, Shonagh, what would you advise people to focus on right now? What do you think would be the best use of our energy, of our spirituality, to remain calm, so we can engage our critical thinking and make the best choices for ourselves? Where do you think we should focus our energy right now?
I take my class. I'm not kidding. I think we should focus our energy on getting a foundational knowledge and understanding of the maxims of law, because it is so, so, so empowering, and understand how contracts work, because contracts are spiritual in nature, and everything is contract. And also learn those logical fallacies. Okay, learn the trivium and the logical fallacies. If you don't want to take my class, that's fine. Go on triviumeducation.org, and there are a series of talks and interviews there that will discuss the trivium, which is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar is the words we hear or read. So we want to have the ability to be able to understand what we're reading. And logic is that ability to look for, are there any contradictions in this person's argument and what they're putting forth? And then rhetoric is the ability to speak to it. So in the mystery school traditions, that would be thought of as knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So we have got to give ourselves that second education, or we're going to be up Shites Creek. So that is very, very important. And also to learn this concept of shifting the burden, and also learn about affidavits. So I put this on my Facebook today. I kind of dip in and dip out of Facebook, but I have seen so many people so scared and wringing their hands about this mandatory vaccination. Oh my God, what are we going to do? And I went, you know what? Just a cotton picking minute here. Wait a minute. We are sovereign. We've forgotten that, and we act like slaves, and we keep begging our government, for benefits and privileges, instead of taking our life into our own hands and taking that responsibility. Well, what is an affidavit? An affidavit is a sworn statement of truth. It's sworn under God under penalty of perjury. Now, perjury is a big deal, because if you commit perjury, you're in big trouble. So in any case, all right. And I talked about conditional acceptances. And so someone gives you an offer, for instance, mandatory vaccine. And you can say, I'll accept your offer. Sure, you can vaccinate me if you sign this affidavit here that I have ready for you to sign. And in this affidavit, it says that you guarantee with absolute certainty that this vaccine is totally safe, and I will not experience any negative effects from this whatsoever. It will cure me. And if it doesn't, you agree to be held personally liable for damages, criminally and civilly, to the tune of, pick your number, $30 million. Please sign here. Now, I guarantee that agent is not going to want to be held personally responsible, and they are not going to want to sign that affidavit. No problem. I have another sheet here, another document. If you could just sign this saying that no, you are not going to sign the affidavit, please. Do you see? So you've got a record of that. Now, I'm not saying that will be easy, because they are going to give us pushback. But, and here's the deal, they cannot force us into anything. This whole system is based on our consent. But of course, just like they will make sure people are in abject poverty, so they have to accept a check
Or they
contract for the government.
exactly, or they will want to.
We want to learn how to do an affidavit that we have them sign, and another document that they sign if they refuse to sign it. And then we have proof to say, hey, I showed up. I was at the ready under these conditions. Now, here's the deal. People are so enslaved, they don't even realize that they can create those conditions. They don't realize that they can create their own terms to a contract. They can negotiate the contract. Now, obviously, they will refuse to sign it. Perfect. So then guess who's in dishonor after that? They're in dishonor. That's based on all of this information that I'm sharing, which is foundational. And so this is what people need to focus. They have got to get knowledge, because knowledge is power, and the truth shall set you free.
And that's a really good lead in to how will that knowledge assist people in moving forward with it.
Well, it helps you navigate. So shifting the burden is a big deal, and no one knows how to do that, because again, we have been conditioned like Pavlov's dog to be completely compliant and unquestioning. But when you shift the burden, now you're putting the pressure on them, and you're making them prove their claim, whatever it is. Listen, I have two beautiful daughters that I raised, and I did not have this knowledge when they were tiny, and my girls were vaccinated. It is my greatest regret. I mean, thank God they weren't, damaged by those vaccines.
Same here.
But
when we know better, we do better, right?
Yes, yep. That stuff is still in their bodies, though, and I feel very, very badly about that. But I didn't know, and I didn't even know that I could question the doctor and say, okay, I'll agree to those, but I would like to know, first of all, what's in those things. I would like a list of the ingredients, and then I would like for you to explain to me why that ingredient is in there and guarantee to me its safety. This would be a big thorn in the side of big pharma and its agents if people knew that they had that level of authority, because we are more powerful than we can even imagine. Absolutely. But we've been raised in a slave society. We just have. I think we've been farmed. We've been domesticated, and so many of us have lost our fire. We don't even know these principles. And I'll tell you, when I've shared this with like small groups, all of a sudden I realized I'm doing all the talking, and you can hear a pin drop. And I'm like, oh my goodness, am I taking up too much time here? People will be like, no, keep going. I want to hear. So it's like when people hear a truth, when they recognize the truth, they just want more. And so go type in your browser, maxims of law, ecclesia. And so ecclesia.org, what I like about that is it lists the maxims in order of subject. So there's, groups of maxims for contract, and maxims for common sense, and maxims for pleas, and all of this kind of thing. You can go on, look up Bouvier's Law Dictionary, and you can read them in both Latin and English.
And we'll include the links to those to make it more simple. Yep.
Yeah, super.
Excellent. Well, Shonagh, this just sounds fabulous. I want to sign up for your courses, and I can tell that they would be so rich. I just can't wait to learn more.
first of all, I have my thoughts on 5G, and that is, first of all, these governors and mayors, whether they are stripping our rights by forcing us to stay at home and not make a living, which we have a full right to, and taking away our constitutional rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These guys, these public officials, have to take an oath of office. And that oath of office gives specific instructions in what their kind of duties are.
Right.
And so we can write to these guys and say, I accept your oath of office. Because again, that's an offer, it's a contract. I accept your oath of office. And it appears, because you be careful about making a claim, it appears that you are in breach of contract because these 5G towers are going up and there is quite a bit of information out there that this is very dangerous. And you have promised to look out for the people of this state, you see? And by the way, I used to live in Washington State. There is an RCW, it's Revised Code of Washington. Every state has their revised codes, but if it's true in Washington, it would be true in other states. But RCW 56, what is it? RCW 56.42.03, 42.56.030. You can look it up.
What a memory.
The people of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. That's verbatim. These people are public servants. They serve us. You will never hear that term anymore. They don't want us to know that they are our servants. They work for us. And we are in a corporatocracy. So we've got Google and Facebook and YouTube and whatnot dictating to us. Nevertheless, this country is founded on the Republic, and we have a constitution, and these guys take oaths of office, and also they're bonded. And it's a public hazard bond. It's an insurance bond. So if they kind of screw up, that's their insurance. However, if they go beyond the scope of their oath, that bond is not going to protect them anymore. Now they are personally liable. And so I'll just put that out there as something to consider moving forward when people are putting together documents. In other words, the petitions, that's great. It's basically begging. You need to put something together.
I'm not a fan of petitions, not at all. Or marching against something, right? Yeah.
No, I have my opinions on that. That women's march from a couple of years ago where women were wearing like felt vaginas on their head, I was just beside myself. I was like,
I have no words for that.
Yeah. No. I mean, I was like, they are mocking you. You fell right into their trap. And again, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Right.
But no one knows how to wield it. And again, this can be done with no violence, not a single shot fired, but a working, very clear knowledge of one's rights and how to defend them. And that's those maxims in all the Constitution. I mean, right now, they're also talking about being able to go door to door and impose these vaccines and also remove people from the house. Well, that goes against the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, which is the right to the safety of our homes. They can't do that. They can't do that.
But they don't want us to know that.
But again, this is up to the people to school these guys. Because another maxim of law says, favors from government often carry with them enhanced measures of regulation. This is what government becomes, because human nature hasn't changed. So government becomes a leviathan, which we have. Now all of a sudden you can't just go to the store and buy raw milk. Oh no, because someone in government doesn't want you to have it. And you can't explore your own consciousness to maybe weave in a little mushroom into the discussion. So you can't explore your consciousness with fungi that grow out in nature or plants that grow out in nature that have been used God knows, for countless thousands of years by people to go into high trance states, to connect with the gods, with the spirits, as certain people did for their communities to bring back knowledge. We have the oracles of Delphi, uh, the seers all over, the Volva, Volva of the Norse traditions. There were cannabis seeds and I think mushrooms as well found in the graves of some of those women. So this is very, very old way of connecting with the sacred.
To let everyone know that we're experiencing some technical difficulties. Speaking of technology, on Shonagh's end, with the it seems to be identified being in her rural area, which would be wonderful to not have the influences of the higher frequencies that we have, being closer to city center, that everything is working well. However, we pay a price for that. But I'm digressing. Normally, I like to gracefully wind down these conversations. And since Shonagh can still hear me, I believe that I would like to thank her from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. There are a few more things that we could have touched upon, but maybe we will reconvene and have part 2 or 3 to tack on to this, especially as this drama kind of unfolds. We can maybe pick up where we are, but we will have information about how you can reach Shonagh and visit her website, learn more about her work, how you can sign up and consider her online classes, and her upcoming work, and just what all is happening in her world. It is just fascinating. And Shonagh, thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I'm just, you've absolutely been a light in my world. It's such an honor to have met you. And thank you so much for your time today. We will, this is not going to be our last rodeo. We will meet again very soon. So thank you so much. So bye for now.